I'm going to introduce some terminology that you're going to need to understand for the more lab type material for the muscular system. We're going to talk about action. We're going to be talking about origin and insertion. So add in origin to that list. We're going to be talking about prime movers, antagonists, synergists, and fixators. The action of the muscle is what movement does it make at a particular joint. The insertion is the part of the muscle that is going to attach to the movable bone. The origin of the muscle is the one that's going to attach to the immovable bone. So let me repeat that. The origin of the muscle will attach to the immovable bone. The insertion is the part of the muscle or the end of the muscle that will attach to the movable bone. If you think back to when we discussed the functions of the skeleton, one of the major functions of the skeleton is to act as a series of levers around which skeletal muscles contract. So when you have levers, one part has to move, and sure enough, the insertion is going to be attached to the bone that moves. For your movements, there will be a single muscle that is mainly responsible for a specific movement, and that is going to be known as the prime mover. Also the agonist, but I've never heard it called that. People usually call it the prime mover. The antagonist, maybe more than one, is going to work in opposition to the action of the prime mover. There will be synergists to the prime mover who are going to aid in that movement. And occasionally you might consider fixators, which are going to stabilize the origin of the prime mover. So those are going to be muscles that are close to and supporting the origin of the muscle. Again, origin is the end that is going to attach to the bone that doesn't move, the immovable bone, or where the fixed end of a muscle attaches. Most will be bones. Some are going to be connective tissue sheets or bands. And they are most typically proximal to the other end of the muscle, which is the insertion when you're talking about a person in anatomical position. Insertion is where the movable bone attaches, and the action is that specific movement produced by skeletal muscle. So in this case, you're talking about biceps brachii, and the primary action of biceps brachii will be flexion of the antebrachial area. And how do I know? Because the biceps brachii will originate either on the clavicle or the proximal part of the humerus, and the insertion will be on the radius. If you take a look at that diagram, you can see that that's what's happening. So muscles do usually work together in groups. So you'll have an agonist, you'll have a synergist, and you will, of course, have an antagonist. The agonist is going to be the prime mover, as I said, which is the muscle that is primarily responsible for producing that movement. And again, biceps brachii is going to be responsible for flexion of the elbow. Synergist is going to be a muscle that's going to help that agonist or prime mover work. So when you talk about elbow flexion, synergist to biceps brachii will be known as brachioradialis. Fixators are going to be synergists that are going to prevent any other movement at that particular joint. We rarely talk about fixators in this class, not enough time. And then we have antagonists. So when you talk about an antagonist, it's going to be a muscle who is going to have the opposite action of that prime mover. Classic example, biceps brachii is going to be an elbow flexor. Triceps brachii is going to be the antagonist to biceps brachii. Its action will be elbow extension. So why might we want to have an antagonist. Why don't we just want that prime mover doing its thing? Think about that for a second. The reason is because we do not want to damage the joint. If you have a prime mover that is super strong and you have nothing to counteract that movement, you may actually hurt yourself because the prime mover will just keep working until the joint is actually distorted. And I love this picture because, first of all, I envy that flexibility. And secondly, you can see very clearly that you have a muscle contracting in order to help with flexion. And you have those muscles will be the quadriceps groups. The muscles that are marked in green are the quadricep group. And you will also see the muscle group in red, and those are going to be the hamstrings, which will have the opposite action of the quadriceps.